Hi, everyone. I apologize for not being live and in person today, but this is our backup plan. And Amanda and I are doing a presentation on answering legal reference questions, and Amanda's going to follow up with her live presentation, and I'm just going to get started. So the learning objectives for our presentation is to identify the unauthorized practice of law, which is the first thing we're going to do. And then we want to teach you how to avoid the unauthorized practice of law. Those are the first things. And then the rest of it is how to find useful resources. And Amanda's going to cover copyright and licensing and a few other things. So, the unauthorized practice of law. So, in answering legal reference questions, one of the most important barriers is that you don't want to run afoul of the law. And there's this prohibition in Texas and in most states, but um, they're all different in every state. There's different statutes. So, you don't want to be accused of practicing law. And what is the practice of law? That definition is very vague, but it does include the giving of advice or the rendering of any service requiring the use of legal skill or knowledge. And it may even be broader than that. So the rule of thumb is that you don't give legal advice and you just give legal information. And what is the difference between legal advice and legal information? That's what we're going to cover next. So, what's legal advice? Um, Resource selection. So, if someone comes to you with a question and, and gives you this fact pattern, usually they come in and they say, well, this is happening to me. I have this legal problem and I don't know what to do about it. And you may know because you have some information about and some background in legal resources, you may think, oh, this is you'd be better off with this resource than this resource. That's actually considered legal advice. So you can't sort of lead them to the right place to start unless it's in a very general way. So you might say to any question, maybe you'd like to look at a legal encyclopedia. And let me show you the table of contents and the index. That's not legal advice. But if you were to help them look up the particular topic and help them find the particular topic, that's bordering into legal advice, right? Um, you also can't identify or evaluate a legal issue. So, librarians are very good at what lawyers have to do, which is called issue spotting. So, someone will come up and tell you this long story of theirs. And because we're trained the way that our training works and the way that our minds work, we're really good at picking out what the issues are. Um, and we want to steer people to finding out more about those issues. So, for instance, oh, it sounds like you're a tenant and you have a landlord problem. So you need to look at landlord tenant law, right? And it sounds like you have uh, an issue with, another one might be an issue with um, uh, divorce, right? So even though those are very broad terms, just the fact that you're specifying what it is and maybe like narrowing the topic for them is kind of not something we're supposed to do. So we basically don't want to get into a long, complicated reference interview about legal issues, right? And that's one of the hardest things because we're trained to do the reference interview. We're trained to help people find information, but where legal information is concerned, you really don't want to get into questions about the facts, right? Once you can recognize it's a legal question, then it's probably time to stop, refer them to legal advice, give your disclaimer, and we'll get to that disclaimer, and ask them if they'd like um, to learn how to use any of the resources. You can steer them to some general resources online, but beyond that, I would just take a step back. You can't help them fill out forms. So, and that even extends to someone brings you a form and says, I don't understand this term, right? You can help them look up that term, but you can't explain how they should complete the form. So how they should fill out that term. So one thing you could help them do is, well, here I can help you use a legal dictionary to look that up. And then you can't give step by step help. And this comes up a lot. So someone wants to they're being evicted. You can't say, oh, what you need to do is file this in this form and this in this court. And that gets into legal advice, right? That's the area of an attorney, right? So you can't actually say, well, first you need to find something in this legal encyclopedia and then you can't actually do that research process that you would naturally do if it was any other question, right? But if it deals with the law, you can't really go down that road. So when we talk about what legal information is, um, there is a difference between legal information and legal advice, right? So we can provide definitions of legal terms. We can tell you what resources we have on these legal topics, and then we can show you the laws, right? And tell you where to find the laws. Um, and another thing you can do is you can tell people or explain to people or train them on how to use any of these legal resources. So while you can't select the right ones, you can lead them to general resources and explain how to use them. So you can explain how to use a digest, which is actually kind of difficult. So that's perfectly within your job. You can show them how to use an index. Any of those difficult legal resources tend to be quite difficult to use. You can explain how they work. So that's something that you can do. You can't pick out their terms for them though. So it's very it's very tempting to help them by explaining how to do it. I just don't do it. Make them give you a term and then you can show them how to look it up using that term, but don't help them with that term. And similarly, you can help them to build a search string, but you can't come up with the terms for them. So you can explain how to use limiters, do online searching, excuse me, how to use Boolean, but you can't come up with the actual search terms. Okay. And then another thing you can do is teach information literacy. So anything that's in the framework, you can apply it. So you can teach them. You can't evaluate the resources for them, though. So it's basically you have to take a step back and do a teaching mode and not a research assistant mode. So disclaimers are very important, and I've gotten so used to saying these things to people that it doesn't bother me. And I encourage you because librarians have a difficult time in many cases saying no to people or saying they can't help. It's contrary to our natures, I think, for a lot of us. So I just would practice and have sort of a pat thing that you say. So, I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice. You may need a lawyer, and then don't say anything else, right? Just this is the end. I can't help you with this matter, right? And if you happen to be a lawyer like I am, a lot of times you just have to make it clear that even though they know you're a lawyer, and they will be persistent because they know you can help them, you have the special knowledge, you really have to make it clear that I can't be your lawyer. I can't give you legal advice. You may need to find a lawyer and speak to a lawyer about this. So you just have to be very clear. And people are persistent, but you just have to say no. And I encourage you to support each other. So sometimes you may have to call someone else to say the same thing to the person, another librarian or your boss. And then that sometimes helps them to get the message that this is something we can't do, and it is a state law. And you'd be surprised, um, someone, there may be a lawyer there who's listening to you have this conversation, and if they hear you giving legal advice, they may report you, right? So people rat each other out. That's how librarians do get in trouble. There's not a lot of cases of librarians getting in trouble, if any. It's usually some other practitioner, but it's just something to get in the habit of not even crossing that line, right? Just never do it. It's never a good thing. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help you. It gets everybody in trouble. And one thing you can do is refer people to find an attorney. I always give this, if I get that feeling that, oh, this is a legal question I can't answer, I do my disclaimer. I do it in email all the time. I do it where I work, right? Um, and part of my job is giving legal information, so I have to make this decision all the time. And I say your gut feeling will tell you when it's something that you can't do. Just do your disclaimer, and then say, if it sounds like you may need a lawyer, I encourage you to contact lawyer referral. And then the state bar of Texas has one. It's at this link. And then also at this link, they have further resources, so other sort of certified referral services besides the state bar, that can help people. And that's the end of it. I refer you to this resource. There's nothing else that I can do. um, there are a lot of resources, and you can provide resources for them. You can't select the best ones for their particular issue, and that becomes very difficult. Two, I teach legal information resources at UT in the library school, and so I have a lot of experience with this. And so I've picked out a couple of really great resources. My students have to answer reference questions. And for a great number of them, they're able to answer the reference questions with information they find on the internet. And that's because some of these resources have really been created for self-help. And one of those is the state law library. So the state law library has a self-help section, and they've already done the work. So, for all of the most common questions that the public will come up with for legal information and legal reference, they've already curated the resources. So, there's something that you can show them this resource and how to navigate through it, but I wouldn't look up their question for them. I just wouldn't, you know, seat them down, point to it, and they can find their answers, right? Another one is Texas Law Help, which is a nonprofit, and they have come up with similarly Texas questions that people ask that they need self help on the most. And I've not been able to stump them in terms of, can I think of a question that they don't answer, or that they don't give you some kind of guidance, and they link out to a lot of other resources. Um, Except for, there's always more complicated things that people need legal help with, um, that of course they're not going to deal with. They deal with the most common, but they do deal with sort of all the different variations of those common questions. And then I encourage you to if you are looking for resources for yourself, or if you're looking for resources on particular topics that are not covered by those, I would look at LibGuides. So go out on the internet and find a law library, an academic law library, where the law librarians have already curated the resources for you. And that way you don't have to get in that business of selection, right? You can just say, here's a nice LibGuide. Why don't you look at that? And just be aware that use Texas materials for because you're in Texas. Not everything is state specific, but a lot of legal information is very state specific. So there's a lot of laws that are state laws. So just be aware of that. For anything that is a federal law, though, of course, they could use LibGuides from outside of the state. And now it's time for Amanda's section. I can be contacted at, um, I guess I'll have to include a slide with my contact information, but feel free to contact me. I may not be able to answer your legal questions, but I can help point you in the right direction. So thank you so much, and I hope this video was somewhat helpful.